Agriculture and Forests, Government of Bhutan. Dr. V.K. Saraswat, Member of Niti Aayog, India. Respected Bimla Rai Paurel, Secretary of the Development Affairs of the Office of the President and former National Planning Commission member of Nepal. Dr. Teresa Christina Fogelberg, Deputy Chief Executive of Global Reporting Initiative and also the independent board member of ICIMOD. His Excellency Roland Schaffer, Ambassador, Embassy of Germany in Nepal. His Excellency Peter Budd, Ambassador, Embassy of Australia in Nepal. Mr. Sonam Wanchuk, Founding Director, Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh. The floor is yours, Dr. Molden.
Okay, thank you, Nina. Distinguished panelists, participants in the meeting, thank you all for returning after a wonderful inaugural session. Now we're getting very much into the substance. And by the way, what I'd like to do is also welcome you to this particular hall because it's the first time we're using this room as well. And I want to appreciate especially all the people who are working day and night to put this together in time. So, but that actually, I think I'm somehow satisfied with the way it's turned out, definitely. What I'd like to do, and I'll go ahead and 1 billion people living in 10 river basins downstream and 240 million people in the mountains. So every now and then, after 10 or 15 years, it's good to update those figures. And this is the first time we'll use it, but let's continue with that now. But that just humanity dependent one way or another on the water, energy, food, biodiversity, resources in the mountain areas. 8 countries share this mountain resource of what we call the Hindu Kush Himalaya: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. And we also know that if we can share the management of this mountain resource, the results, the outcomes would be much, much better. And that's one of the outcomes meetings like this hope to achieve as well. What I wanted to do, too, is talk a little bit about climate change. So we also had some interesting results from a study. So what the Paris Agreement said, we should be below 2 degrees, well below 1.5 degrees. Unfortunately, the trajectory we're on is something more than the 2 degrees. Now, what happens in mountains is temperatures rise faster at higher elevations. So it gets hotter faster at higher elevations. So if we were to reach 2-degree warming, what that would mean in the mountains would be 3 and 4 degrees up in high mountains. If we could reach 1.5 degrees, it would be about 1.8. Still too hot. So 2 degrees is too hot for mountains. If we're on the trajectory right now, there's some predictions that we'll lose 60 or 70% of our snow and glacier melt with the present trajectory. So what are the consequences? Now, right now, the glaciers are melting rapidly. I feel that glaciers, in a way, are our first early warning system of climate change. It's a huge early warning. So the consequences are immediate for communities living next to mountain areas, and also the hydrology of river systems changes downstream. But not only that, with climate change, what we see are extreme events increasing. So we may see more rain in this region. The rivers on an annual basis may have about the same, even more flow, but the difference is we'll get very heavy rainfall and more droughts. And so the potential of hazards increases very, very much. In addition to that, with climate change, we have changing ecosystem pattern, changing agricultural systems. So the world will look much, much different than it does now with climate change. Now, the other part is we recognize that it's not just climate change that's happening. So we have a whole other host of changes. There's out-migration, there's globalization, people moving to cities as well. So what we like to think of that as climate plus change, that is all acting together to make life, to make a very complex and uncertain future. But while we look at change, we also recognize that there's opportunities, a lot. So we see that there are high-valued mountain products, and there's opportunities to get those to market. Even with climate change, maybe apples grow up higher elevation as well. We see that perhaps mountains could take a lead in innovations like clean energy for all. And if men are leaving the villages, what about empowering women communities to take a lead role? And we can also, very important, is look into this dimension of upstream and downstream. And if we could figure out a way to share benefits in our river basins, I believe we can have better management of our water resources into the future. But we also feel there's a lot of opportunity in meetings like this for collaboration, for cooperation amongst us. A lot of prospects for mountains, also bringing us together and collaborating better around mountains as a region. I would also say it's really important to bring very good science into these solutions. So there is an opportunity to bring better science and technology to develop solutions into the mountains. Now, we had put up a definition of resilience. I'll just remind you the way we think about it. It's the ability of communities and ecosystems to be prepared for shocks, to recover from shocks, and we like to add to bounce forward, right, to transform into something better than before. There was one very interesting study. We had the earthquake, right, in 2015, dual earthquake, very tragic. It really shook everybody to the core. Actually was a time also to learn something about resilience. So what we did is sent people out. We noticed some villages would bounce back quicker than other villages. So we actually sent people out to try and figure out why were some communities more resilient than other communities. And what we found, it was interesting. There were 6 factors that seemed to play a big role. One was the natural resource endowment. If people had good water supply, good forest, right, that made a big difference to people. The physical connectivity made a difference. The access to external development services made a difference. Entrepreneurship, social homogeneity, and the local economy, local economic activities all made a difference. There's a few other findings. It was the combination that made a difference. So it wasn't that one factor was important. It had to be in combination with other factors. And that if you went to one village, the combination was different in that village than other village. So, of course, what that means is context is everything. Context is so important in this. And the other part is that there's really not one single solution, that we really have to put our minds together with the communities to develop solutions. So what that means is we have to have solutions that use transdisciplinarity. And by that we mean that we appreciate community science. We appreciate community knowledge. We bring researchers, practitioners, private sector and governments together with communities to develop those kind of solutions. And that's one way we think about transdisciplinarity. One other part is in the mountains. It's really fantastic how mountain people adapt and already, in a sense, are resilient to many, many changes, right? How could they survive otherwise? On the other hand, I feel with the climate plus change coming, there's a lot of shocks that may be just too much, too difficult to handle. And for example, one type of change is springs. So we see right across the Himalayas springs drying out for a number of reasons. But it really is difficult then for people to survive in those communities. The other is the threat of floods. It seems like more and more we're seeing more and more floods. Certainly the hazard increases. It might be climate. It might be because people are living in the floodplains. But somehow with climate change we can expect that the hazard will increase. I would want to tell a brief story from first starting in northern Assam, next to the foothills of Arunachal Pradesh. We had worked with a community to put in a flood early warning system, a simple gadget where when the water level comes up, it sends off a siren. But it wasn't the gadget, it was the organizing the community and building a network of communities downstream. So when a woman actually takes care of this gadget, and when the flood comes, she actually makes phone calls downstream. She makes phone calls to the government so they can go out and rescue people. And actually we're discussing with the remote sensing agency. We said, let's try that out in other places. And so we tried a solution across Nepal and India. So we put up 2 of these with partners, of course, and with the governments, 2 in Nepal and 1 just across the border in the plains in India. And the idea there was to get communities together across the border. So I remember the Indian panchayat leader came across and she begged the Nepal community, if the flood comes, you please give us a phone call, which the Nepal community agreed to. And that was actually about 1 month before the floods in the Terai. So it did happen. The floods happened, and it did happen. People were calling each other up, and lives and livelihoods were saved. But I think it's more this, the gadget worked, the communication worked, but I think that network building across community is something that will help us prepare for shocks and something that will help us in the future work better together and transform society. And I like that example too, because it was working with community, was working with researchers, technology. Government agencies were very, very much involved in this all along, and the media to get out the story as well. So it was a whole bunch of people working together. Now, so that reminds us to work for an integrated fashion, and it reminds us that the participation of all groups, including communities, are critical. In closing, I want to turn briefly to a few other results from this HIMAP, Himalayan Monitoring and Assessment Program. Some people heard about this in the morning. Now, HIMAP gathered 300, probably more people. And together, this group of practitioners developed a vision for the Hindu Kush Himalaya consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals. That is a prosperous, peaceful, and poverty-free future. Second, a future that is energy, water, and environment secure. And third, a future that is climate and disaster resilient. But then to realize this vision, they put 3 priority actions. And number 1 was to cooperate at all levels, community, national, regional, and global levels, for sustainable mountain development. And because we can magnify the benefits of cooperation upstream and downstream, and the cost of non-cooperation will be too high in the future. And who bears the brunt of that but the most poor and marginalized people? Number 2 is to recognize and prioritize the uniqueness of the HKH mountains and people in national, regional, and global decision-making process. So oftentimes decisions are made in Beijing, in Delhi, and we wonder if the mountain voices are heard in those decisions. So it is recognizing the unique value. And to allocate significantly greater resources, intensify conservation efforts in mountains. Number 3 is to take a concerted effort to keep global levels of temperature rise to below 1.5 degrees. So we really have to get our voice out in that global stage. Otherwise, we'll see a very difficult future in mountains. So I've touched on a few challenges, a few issues, and about resilience building. But now we have a wonderful panel, distinguished panel, with lots of experience. And what I'd like to do is turn to the panel to explore these issues in greater detail. So I have a series of questions and would like to ask some of our panelists, or ask all of our panelists to respond. My first question is, what are some of the key issues and obstacles for building a resilient HKH for the future of a sustainable Asia? And first, I would like Professor Goher Rizvi to shed some light on this topic.
Thank you, David. Thank you for both setting the background and posing a very important question. Let me, before answering the question, simply just say that we in Bangladesh put enormous importance to both these issues of sustainability and resilience. In fact, you can see we have a very powerful delegation from Bangladesh. The Minister for Chittagong Hill Region is here. The Chairman of Parliamentary Committee on Hill Region is here. Secretary of the Hill Region, Ambassador. The reason they are all here is because Bangladesh really attaches importance to these. And that was another reason why I was very excited to come here. Both sustainability and resilience are absolutely central to our concerns. Not only because it is a part of Agenda 2030, but locally it is a part of our Vision 2021, where we are aspiring to become a middle-income country, and to 2042, where we are aspiring to become a developed country status. And normally, when we gather in these sort of forums, usually we are overwhelmed by problems, and it seems we are battling against a lost cause. But if you look at the experience of Bangladesh, which is again a very improbable story, Bangladesh isn't the most, you wouldn't associate Bangladesh with the story. In 1971, when Bangladesh came into being, Bangladesh was not regarded as a viable state. Today, it is an exemplar of development. And the reason I say this is it gives us hope that through innovations, we can achieve things that are normally thought impossible. Almost all our rivers originate in Hindu Kush Himalayas. We are children of the rivers. Our future, our survival depends on the rivers. So, as I can say, there's no way of exaggerating its importance. Yet, on both those scores, and of course, as most of you know, we are also a frontline state when it comes to climate change and global warming. Yet, when it comes to meeting these challenges, I think we may be able to share with you some ideas. Of course, more importantly, learn from you, but also share a few ideas. Bangladesh today is probably well on its way to becoming sustainable. In 1971, when we became independent, we were only 70 million people. And we were chronically short of food. We lived ship to mouth. The ships were late. Starvation was on the horizon. Today, we have over 160 million people. We are surplus. And in good years, we export. Our agricultural revolution is unaffected by drought, flood. This year we have flood. No real impact or monsoon. So there is something has been achieved through research, through experimentation, new crops, seeds, fertilizers, and so forth. It really has enabled us, at least in terms of food, to become resilient. But there is more to it, and more needs to be done. We are, obviously, as I said earlier, trying to reach a mid-income and then developed status. What is holding us in Bangladesh back, as in all over South Asia? Our growth is hampered by energy. And currently, we are all using more fossil energy and coal than we should be, which should be. What is interesting about South Asia is that while every country in South Asia is energy deficit, yet South Asia, if it can harness its potential, and this is what brings me to your point about regional effort, cooperation, it can become actually not only energy surplus, but energy surplus with clean hydroelectric energy. And what is most interesting is, it cannot be done without cooperation. Let me just give you a few examples. Nepal is hugely surplus, almost 100,000 megawatts potential. Bhutan, 20,000 plus potential. Northeast India, Arunachal, further up, God knows, huge potential. But the problem has always been where the source of energy is and where the demands are not matching. For instance, northeastern Indian energy demand is in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and so forth. The only way that can be harnessed is by carrying it through Bangladesh. Therefore, there's a need for cooperation. Similarly, with Nepal, we have not developed this project velocity. We have already started working in trilateral with Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal, India. All this clearly shows that if we work as a region, these problems can be not only resolved, it will expedite our growth, which will then enable us to invest in other areas as well. I'll come back to it just to say to you that through innovation and through regional cooperation, what has so far seemed an impossible task is now very much there within our grasp, and important steps have been taken to move in that particular direction.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Also giving a message of hope from Bangladesh, and I'm sure there's a lot to be learned, and also for emphasizing on regional cooperation. I wanted to turn to our minister from Bhutan on the issues and obstacles as you see them from your perspective.
Thank you, David. Good evening. On the onset, I would like to thank the ICIMOD and also the government of Nepal, especially the Ministry of Population and Environment, for hosting this event and also inviting us. So me and my delegation, we are extremely glad that we are able to participate in this important forum. And we also like to thank the EU, body is here, the EU for supporting this event. I think it's very timely, and it's also an important agenda for a mountainous country like Bhutan as well as the other member countries in the ICIMOD. So, like the colleague from Bangladesh, I think the Hindu Kush Himalaya region and the member countries, the population, in terms of population, it has quite a substantial number. In terms of the possibilities of going through this so much, prone to hazards are also very, very, very high. This way we hear every year, in some part we have the earthquakes, in some part we have the flash flood, in some part we have the floods. So I think this shows that our region is very, very vulnerable to many of these natural calamities. And also we are very happy to learn, in the last few decades, all the member countries, we have greatly reduced the poverty. I think now we are in the last stage of reduction of poverty. Look at Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, all this, we see substantial reduction in number of people. As he was mentioning, the people who are not able to feed themselves has reduced. Actually, virtually, I think the SAARC region and also the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, in next few years, there won't be many people who will go hungry. But I think the nutrition aspect and that things we need to see further. I think the panel members here will have so many solutions and ideas. But what I would like to, I don't want to touch into the overall, but I will capture on just certain things that I see are important. First, I would like to acknowledge the findings that are what David has underlined, the three findings, the recommendations, the resource allocations, that we need to identify specific problems, then also the other areas, the regional cooperation. I would like to support all these things. On top of that, what I would like to support is that I think one of the important aspects is the issue of this resilience. I think all the countries, we need to mainstream in our planning. And resources must be allocated, which means there should be a political will that this is a top agenda for all of us. And also we need to identify Hindu Kush Himalaya region is a very complex. The ecosystem itself is very complex. So we have to, when we mainstream this in our planning, we have to look at the ecosystem. Not looking at piece and pieces, but I think we need to have an ecosystem-based planning. So in the case of Bhutan, what we are doing is, through the support of the World Bank, we have already started a strategic plan for climate resilience. And that will be very important when we start the 12th five-year plan, which will begin from 2018 July. The other areas, if you look at the Hindu Kush Himalaya, the region, the northernmost part of almost all the not really the northern, majority of us, the people living inside this Hindu Kush Himalaya region, are pastoralists. We have large substantial amount of people. Their problem, their idea, their way of life are different from those living in the mid and also in the lower region. So we need to give due importance. Just this way, I think we need to find a practical solution. And the first thing what I understand is that we need to have, in most of the cases when we do planning, we need to have different stages. One thing, the preventative. I think for this resilience, we can prevent most of the things. I think preventative planning, what could be done before any natural calamities or climate-induced effect or anything else, I think the preventive measures are very important. This way, Bhutan takes a pride in conserving our environment. Root cause of many of the problems is degradation of environment. So environment, if we degrade it, if we cut down the trees, if we destroy the forests, this, I think, has several implications. So we recognize that environmental conservation is the important tool to mitigate most of the problems. Then, but the thing is, not everything could be prevented. There could be. So the next level of planning that we need to look at is the coping mechanisms. Yes, there are certain things which we cannot do, but once it occurs, how do we? So I think these strategies must be developed, formulated. Then the other thing is we need to see how this could be then. If it works out, how could we replicate these situations in similar? And we need to show to the people that this coping mechanism or these preventive measures are acceptable and they are working well. We need to demonstrate. So these are the things which I see. From my perspective, there could be many things, but I think we can categorize them. If we keep on explaining, I think the solutions are plenty. It's as big as the mighty Himalayas. I think there could be many solutions. But the thing is, we cannot discuss everything today. But from my side, I like to see that we need to first identify the root cause. And based on that one, we have to see what could be prevented. And if there are things which we cannot prevent, we need to come up with the coping mechanisms, solutions. So, this, I feel it is important. And lastly, again, I want to recommend that the recommendations made by what David has mentioned. I think these are important. These are important, and as a member of the Hindu Kush Himalaya, all of us have a stake there. If there is something occurring in Bangladesh, we should be concerned. The Nepal should be concerned. Afghanistan should be concerned. Because whatever may be, we live in the same Himalayan ecosystem. And we all are brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you make two very important observations. Entirely agree with you. The focus needs to be on preventive.
Needs to be on preventive. But one thing that we need to remind ourselves that cyclones, floods, tsunamis, not only these are natural phenomena outside our control, not only they will occur, but sadly as a result of global warming and climate change, they are becoming more frequent and more severe. But here, let me give you another very hopeful example. In 1970, Bangladesh experienced a terrible cyclone hitting the entire southern and southwest coast and the offshore islands. Approximately 1.5 million people died. Last year, we had a similar cyclone of similar intensity, exactly similar intensity. Because of preventive measures, and we can go into that later on, the death toll barely touched double digit, 12, of the same intensity. So there is huge hope and possibilities, as you say. We need to be prepared to take those preventive measures. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Thank you, and thanks also for highlighting the need to keep the ecosystems for the prevention measures as well. And I love this connection with Bhutan and Bangladesh. The upstream, downstream is definitely there. What I'd like to do is turn to Bimala Podel first to see if you have some issues you might like to share.
Thank you, David. Namaste, distinguished analyst, distinguished guest, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, David, for inviting me to participate in this August gathering as a panelist. I'm not an environmental scientist, but I'm a social scientist, so I put my views from a social science perspective. My comment on your question won't be that ecological. But what I know is, the mountain ecology, it's very fragile. It's very fragile, and it's very difficult to cope with the rapidly changing climate. I'm not sure about the other countries, but in Nepali mountain region, changes in precipitation and the quantity and quality of water have remained some of the major issues related to climate change. We, as social scientists, what I can say is we cannot fight with nature. Nature gives whatever it has to. The best way is to manage them so that the natural assets are used sustainably and capitalized appropriately. And my approach to address this issue would be based on this principle. I would like to, divide these issues in three aspects. Ecological, as I just mentioned, and other colleagues also mentioned. But there are economic issues in mountain. And economic issues actually affect resilience capacity of communities. When I talk about economic issue, it's about livelihood. It's about inaccessibility. It's about lack of access to information, difficult topography, difficult geography, so that people cannot have mobility. People cannot escape from disaster. People cannot respond effectively. So these are some of the issues which are related to access, but more related to lack of diversified livelihood options to the mountain communities. And this is one of the severe issues that I see are important. And for me, diversifying livelihood opportunities could be one of the, best entry point to build resilience among the communities. This is what I have seen from Nepal, because they have very limited and low capital endowment and lack of livelihood security. So when you don't have resilient livelihood, when you don't have the diversified livelihood option, you can't think about disaster. You can't think about how to save your families and well-being. So this is one of the most important. About 2 years says that policymakers know very little about mountain population. We as a policymaker know little about the people that are we talk a lot about migration, and its impact on women, workload, the changing gender roles, and constants related to migration. We also talk about climate change, how climate change is impacting agriculture, how agricultural work has been feminized, how women are coping with landowners from women. And almost every day now, newspapers see articles related to women, related to this women. But there are little discussion about. I have worked in gender relations as a gender advocate for many years, but about mountain women. I haven't been there. Business. Some of these institutions are running and asking them about 10 to 10 men and women to mountain. Be there for 1 month. Start about how we are coping in the engine. What is the relations? And that group should post off. 5 policymakers, 5 media people, and journalists. They will do, let them write it up. And then the issue public. So, I'm not talking, we don't know, we know nothing. We know there are issues. There are scientists on mountain. There are innovations on mountain, but they are not reflected in policies. And this is one of the safeguards that I see.
Wonderful. A pleasure for bringing social science perspective and to bring these issues to policy. I love that idea of bringing people to mountain villages to learn what wonderful. Yeah. move on to a different topic. How critical is it to support transportation and resilience building in order to achieve GDP? You're one.
First of all, good afternoon, and I'm grateful to ICIMOD for inviting me for the discussion on resilience to change. And I like the objective there, having solutions. What's the sustainable future for Asia? That's a sustainable future. And ICIMOD is doing tremendous good work in this direction. Is from this aspect. India, as such, has embarked on both what you have raised. One is sustainability and climate change. Because we are signatory to both 21 number 3, and as well as the sustainability goals. Niti Aayog and ICIMOD have harmonized on these issues as far as sustainability and that's a major exercise that has been done. To answer the question that what should be the kind of what should do for reaching the SDG points. First, you have to understand, and most of you have talked earlier, what is the problem as far as the Himalayan Hindu Kush is concerned. All of us know it is due to the climate change as well as due to the natural and factors which affect the run of HKH. These factors are basically what is natural is, as Madam was mentioning, like young mountain and so on. But most of it is the correlation between natural and natural. And that is where the climate change, poverty, migration, and all of these factors are coming in a big way. Has impact on the livelihood, community residents in the as well as the reason downstream. The mere impact of what happens to the climate downstream. Our Honorable President talked about he gave a very wonderful speech. I must appreciate that. And because we all know that there are reasons for much our own country we are facing the same thing. How much needs are coming? I find in this Shimla and so on, we have a scarcity of water today. That's everything that happens. Changing land use pattern, which is another factor, and which is also present ecological degradation. So the climate change is impact. Some data do it. I also add to that. We are also seeing rise in the rainfall intensity, decline in the winter rain, which is another and springs drying up, aquifers are depleting, and there is a huge impact as far as the quality is concerned. The floods in the Bihar as due to the climate change, and there are water-related disasters, loss of lives, plenty. I was very happy to see the number what the honourable member from Bangladesh mentioned, that preventive measures have resulted in that kind of a reduction in that much of calamity. It's fantastic. So challenges, there are challenges, high rate of poverty in that region, high output migration rate, and poor social and physical infrastructure, poor marketing conditions. That's why there is a problem of livelihood. Lack of biodiversity data sets for developing any planning parameters. We should address this actually. We have a poor data set available which is responsible. So how critical is this adaptation and resilience building in HKH in achieving the SDG goals? This should be because we have to also realize that the mountains are hotspots of different types of changes, natural as and anthropogenic. If we maintain today 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is the pre-industrial era kind of a temperature rise, and then even then the Himalayan region will see extra rise, which I think Dr. Malden was mentioning about, it to the region of 0.3 to 0.7. And then you will have temperatures in the region of 2.3 to 2.7. So the impact is much more going to be adverse. Such a large warming could result and trigger tremendous impact. There are predictions that 1/3 of the Asian glaciers may disappear by about 2100. I don't know how verifiable these figures are there, because I always suspect the data which we use in these modelings and so on. Our experience in Indian Himalayan region shows that people living in the mountains and immediate downstream are becoming more vulnerable to the impact of the climate change. There is no doubt about it. Disasters such as floods, drought are becoming more acute. We think adaptation and resilience building, particularly with respect to climate change, is becoming critical in development planning. If we don't bring it today in development planning, then we are not going to have the required results. And for that, we should link the scientific measures which are essential for maintaining sustainability. It is only through the intervention of science that you can bring great amount of sustainability, and good science and knowledge-based policy support is fundamental to sustainable development. So all countries of the HKH region should be committed to SDG target of 2030, and India after 2015, when the SDG program was signed, it has really been quite active in preparing the plans and implementation. I am personally very glad to see ICIMOD has come up with 9 HKH priorities that are mapped with the SDG in the HKH region. They have been done. And NITI Aayog in India is working with the mountain states that ICIMOD on the details of program of work to achieve SDGs focusing on hills and mountains. This is a major thing which we have done. We have formed about 5 working groups that are facilitating development of action agenda for mountain states, basically, for effective implementation. And we are now concentrating on sustainable tourism in Himalayas, shifting cultivation towards transformation approaches. We are trying to identify them. Inventory and revival of springs in Himalayas for water security, that is the most important thing, because as we say, Himalaya is the water tower of Asia, and it is the third, what we call as a snow mount. So we have to really look at that. And strengthening the skill and the entrepreneurship landscape in the Himalayan region. That is a major requirement, because otherwise we will not be able to actually take care of the migration which is taking place today. As part of the SDG, it is important that we link in this particular resilience thing the 2 major factors. One is what we call as the circular economy, which is a fundamental for this kind of a thing. But I would like to add to that circular economy a word called green economy. And if I bring green economy and the circular economy together, then you have the women empowerment, you have the youth education and skilling, and you also have the issues with respect to the information sharing and cooperation in various areas. So all mechanisms which are going to lead to that are required in this case. We would be very much willing and happy if any of in our thematic programs which NITI Aayog has initiated along with ICIMOD, any of the partner countries would be willing to participate with us. It will be our pleasure. We can always showcase that. Thank you very much.
Very much, also highlighting that NITI Aayog is taking action for the Indian Himalayas, and I very much appreciated that offer to collaborate between any of our partners, which I hope will be taken up. Now, if I can just move down and still on this topic of adaptation and resilience building, Ambassador Pete Budd from Australia, we'd appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yep. I suppose it's getting to that stage where we start repeating what others have said, but I'd like to just tease out a couple of things Bimala said regarding the lack of informed decision-making of policymakers. And on that, I'd actually just like to congratulate you, David, and ICIMOD on the first comprehensive scientific and socio-economic assessment of the HKH. I think that's going to be, it's a historical moment for us. It's going to provide a welcome source of information for policymakers and practitioners going forward. The other thing is that, mountainous development, it's livelihoods, and all the various issues that come in terms of creating that enabling environment for people to be able to have sort of productive livelihoods. And I think in that in the Nepal context, I think federalism offers fantastic opportunities in terms of those policymakers that are making decisions on behalf of mountainous communities. Actually, local governments will integrate that opportunity for policymakers to actually communicate with those communities who are being impacted upon. I think as part of that, and in terms of livelihoods too, we've had a long-standing program that we've worked with UNDP in terms of micro-entrepreneur development program. But again, it's highlighted that although you can lift people out of poverty, it doesn't necessarily build resilience. And I think important going forward is just evidence-based policy dialogue with communities that speaks directly to the nexus of water, energy, land use, water management, food security, and obviously the engagement of communities in that dialogue. The use of science to improve opportunities in agriculture through improved resilience of crop species, mechanisation, cross-cropping, private sector engagement and collaboration on the marketing of products, improving community access to finance, and developing in consultation with business productive public-private sector partnerships going forward. I think that's going to be a real key. And broadly, the role of government is to build an investment-enabling environment and encourage economic development and encourage new players rather than barriers to those players. Infrastructure development, that's a key too, and a part of that also is ensuring that when a contract's delivered for the construction of a road or something else, that you have very transparent contracting and financing arrangements going forward too, to ensure that, or to increase the likelihood that when a contract's given, the cheapest contract's not always the best, but to ensure that greater likelihood of projects being delivered on time. And just final, with respect to the hydro sector too, I think that there can be a tendency to look for those great sort of silver bullets, like, okay, if we can build a 900 megawatt hydro power, then down the track we'll be able to on-sell energy, electricity. But maybe we need to look at, okay, what's achievable, because the bigger you make it, the less likelihood you're going to be able to secure financing. You're throwing construction times down, so maybe a cascading a series of smaller hydros might be the answer there as well. But yeah, so just some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also very much appreciate the support of Australian government in this area of resilience building. I would like to, Teresa, if I could ask you to maybe reflect on the role of private sector in resilience building and adaptation.
I think it's all now. Yeah. Yes, private sector is important, but what I also would like to remind ourselves of, sitting here today, listening to all these excellent speeches, seeing this huge network of scientists, policymakers, field workers, diplomats gathered together, do we all realize that ICIMOD was founded 34 years ago, long before the UN climate framework was negotiated, long before the biodiversity convention was negotiated and agreed upon in '92, and even longer before we had the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. And if you look at the vision and the mission of ICIMOD, but also at the specific role of using research, combining global and locally developed in terms of agenda, but also in terms of knowledge and then application, that approach and that vision, you see that now in the latest version of the international agreements that were only adopted 2 years ago. So what happened in between? You know, in '92, those international conventions were adopted, and we are now so used to them. But everything you developed was from long before. And it was only in 2015 that we indeed got the Paris Agreement with a much stronger focus on adaptation, because I was a climate change director for the Netherlands, National Climate Change Director between 2000 and 2005. Nobody talked about adaptation. Nobody talked about how climate change can have an impact on the lives of women, men, indigenous peoples, vulnerable people living in remote mountain areas. Nobody talked about it. So we, in fact, lost 15 years. And now in 2015, we do have the Sustainable Development Goals. To look at the broad perspective, we have the Paris Agreement that, you know, it's far from perfect, but at least it does acknowledge a very important role of the private sector, not only in terms of funding the agenda, but also in terms of through their own behavior, through their supply chain, but also through local private sector. It can be, it has a very strong impact on reaching all these targets, positive or sometimes also unfortunately in a negative sense. So in that sense, I can assure you that the ICIMOD board has embraced in a very, I think, positively constructive but also critical way. We are looking at the, we are embracing the important contribution of private sector. And I can also assure you, Secretary Panjial, that from the board we are also very much engaged with the gender agenda within the ICIMOD program, and it's a very ambitious and very detailed program. But just to come back to the main message, and that is, you know, what is the beauty of ICIMOD? I think it is the locally applied knowledge, and it's the participatory approach. I don't think we have talked much about that this afternoon. And this morning, some of us, a quite large group actually, visited the Knowledge Park at Godavari. And I think, you know, having been there this morning, we were so impressed because it was actually a demonstration of a whole range of activities and solutions, very concrete, very down to earth, that demonstrate how adaptation and resilience can happen on the ground. And we saw the treadle water pump. I think that was from Bangladesh originally. We saw solar pumps, and we saw the famous beehive briquetting technology, and we warmed ourselves on the stove, because I can tell you it was mighty cold this morning. So what better way to demonstrate that instead of being gloomy, we have the solution at hand, and that is, you know, the science-based practical research agenda of ICIMOD. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and also thank you for the wonderful support from our board members as well. Roland, I'm going to just skip to, and I'll come back to you, but I wanted to get to sticking on this adaptation. We have Sonam Wangchuk, and we met for the first time in Ladakh, and you have some wonderful stories to tell.
About adaptation?
About adaptation.
I think for a resilient Himalayas or the mountains, it is as resilient as the youth of these regions are informed, confident, skillful, prosperous, and happy. And therefore, education is very important so that they are informed and they are resourceful. And I find it somewhat funny that grown-ups tend to find solutions in day-long meetings or week-long workshops, and we forget the times when we all and the future generation spend like a quarter of their lives in a long workshop called school. So that's where I feel skills of the young should be built for a resilient future. In Ladakh, that's what we have tried to do, because often mountain people lack confidence, they feel inferior, and then everything collapses as they leave the region for urban areas and so on. So we have been working with education to make it more meaningful to the mountains, because there is hardly anything that relates to mountains, especially when we are small minorities in the mountains. So bringing more about mountains in the education system is a very important thing, so that they know about it. And then personally, I would just share these examples. We have been using all the government schools so that they could include all about the mountains in the primary education at least, so they feel confident, informed, and skilled. Secondly, at our higher school, which is an alternative school as a model for future, there we engage the young people to find solutions and adaptive solutions to the changing needs. So from helping them understand and promote new ways of farming adapted to our ancestral knowledge, for example, improved versions of compost toilets for farming, to finding answers to the cold winters, which somebody was saying is a calamity that strikes, or a disaster that strikes every winter, through passive solar technologies, blended with ancestral mud architecture, so much so that in my place I have plus 15 or more in Ladakhi winters and feel cold every time I come down to Delhi in winters. Similarly, finding solutions to water problems through things like artificial glaciers, ice stupas, to adapt to diminishing glaciers and so on. And now we are working towards university or higher education with a mountain focus, which is what is lacking. We tend to copy things from the big cities, which are mostly in the plains where the most of the populations are, and stay in the mountains with something wrong in our hands in the name of higher education, which doesn't make us ready for a life in such mountains. So we are trying to set up an alternative university that will engage young people in their 20s for all the skills they would need, and to feel proud of who they are, and to do service to their place. For example, tourism is a big thing in the mountains for livelihood, but sustainable mountain tourism is a skill that young people need, and not just textbook lessons, but engage. So every part of this university, we are trying to make it experience-based, live, with live labs. Like the university runs high-end hotels and homestays and farm stays where the young people work actually and learn and earn, so they don't even have to spend money because their work creates wealth. And similarly, we are starting this year, coming year, 2018, and diploma in integrated mountain development, which would have sustainable tourism, sustainable habitats, like I said, buildings, solar buildings and so on, sustainable eco-management of mountain valleys, and sustainable entrepreneurship for the mountains. By 2020, we hope to make each of these into schools of university, thereby equipping and arming young people to rise to the occasion, face the challenges, and celebrate the mountains. And that is what I think a very important solution towards adaptation and towards making people happily live in the mountains.
Wonderful. And thank you very much for bringing up that important role of training, really on mountain issues, how to live in the mountains. By the way, I think we have to congratulate Sonam Wangchuk. You've just won some nice awards with your group's innovation of this ice stupa, right? So this is where the glaciers are melting to put together a stupa that's known for I think that's a wonderful innovation.
I'll just add that stupas are useful only till there is a glacier that melts and gives a stream full of water. We've already started exploring and experimenting with a life without glaciers, with just snow and rain, how we can still survive and maybe thrive. So we have to look far, far beyond also.
Wonderful. I love the innovation. Thank you very much. I want to turn to my colleague Yanacharya and ask the role of the HKH and the mountains in general in international discussions on SDGs, climate change, and other issues related to resilience building. How do we get the HKH in those discussions?
Thank you very much, David, and thank you all the panelists for really highlighting both the vulnerability as well as resilience. I think this is very important for us. There are many mountain-specific challenges, but again, mountain-specific opportunities. You may be aware that working together with the many countries here, including Bhutan, Nepal has been, and of course institutions like ICIMOD and others, and there are many Central Asian regions as well, we have been trying to really get the mountain-specific issues reflected at the global level. If you look at the Mountain Partnership, which is again there for a long time, but especially to the global agenda, if you like, the SDGs as well as the climate change agreements and the negotiations, we have tried our best to really make sure that when they talk about integrated approach to the solution, for example, social, economic, and environmental, the mountains are there as an example. We heard that how difficult terrain, lack of infrastructure, again the lack of access to resources by the women as well as marginalized people, and again the lack of markets, entrepreneurship we talked about, and how the depletion of resources and the climate change is affecting the livelihood of the people, because the people living in the mountains are the ones who are living closer to the nature on day-to-day basis. You cannot just go to the refrigerator and pick up the food and then have the food there. You have to go to the field, work there, and then get the food for the next season. So I think because they are very close to the nature, the impact of the nature on their livelihood is one of the highest. I think this is how we are approached. When you look at the overall integrated approach, perhaps we should see the mountain community as one of the examples. And similarly, if you look at poverty again, if you look at the access to energy, if you look at the health challenges, and if you look at the food security and the nexus between, that is coming up all the time, between water, energy, and food security, it is so acute over there. That's how we have really tried to bring the issues of the mountain in the international community. The second, of course, the mountain itself. We all talked about this organic relationship between the highland and the lowland, and how much the water as well as ecosystem services, the countries in the lowland depend upon the mountains. So if you look at the 2012, the Rio Plus, the 20 agenda, there are 3 separate paragraphs on mountains. We fought very hard working together with many of the colleagues of the mountain countries and the institutions, and really trying to see that the mountain agenda, for all the reasons that I just explained, has to be a global agenda. Because there is a lot that you can learn, because as you said, they are short of the barometers, for the future, because there are things that are happening because of their dependence, over-dependence on the nature. You can already see things happening. But frankly speaking, we have not been that successful as the ocean, agenda has been. They are precisely using the same language, We are there on the front line, and then whenever, the big oceans and the storms and other comes, and the climate change, that brings about the rise in temperature, then you see the city already underwater. I think we should be really campaigning more to make sure that these issues are really well reflected. But again, having said that, many of the issues that the mountain countries have raised are reflected. And for the first time in the SDG, if you look at that, water, you have a mountain clearly reflected. Now, the 15, if you go there, terrestrial ecosystem, the mountain issues are clearly reflected. Climate change, again, you have a lot of, the mountain countries trying to work together. And the second issue, I think that is very important for all of us, The global agenda has said that we should focus on making sure that our approach is holistic. Now, that is very close to the heart of the people living in the mountain. As we just heard from Mr. Sonam Wangchok, we talked about education, we talked about women, we talked about social issues, we talked about entrepreneurship, we talked about infrastructure, we talked about food. The holistic approach that is being talked about at the global level is so close to the heart, and therefore we should make sure that mountain countries, as vulnerable people, as those countries who are in the front line in terms of they're having the impact of the global climate change, I think it is very important for us to see to it that we should make sure this vulnerability includes the vulnerability of the mountain people, because there is also a solution, not only for them, but the solution for those people living on the lowlands. And finally, on the climate change, this is a very the important issue. Now that we are not only looking at the mitigation and adaptation, the finance and the global partnership is really very, very important for all of us. These countries, especially those who were contributing least to the global climate change, are bearing the brunt the most. So there has to be some fairness and equity in that. Therefore, that is very important. And equally, when you look at that technology, I think it is very important that, of course, technology has to be adapted to the situation in the countries, in the region. But again, there is so much of a technology over there, but that has to be brought to here, to the countries which need it most, and perhaps they can leapfrog some of the steps that they do not necessarily need to go through. And then I think the international community perhaps can really make sure that when you look at the vulnerability, the mountain people are also included in that. Although there are many languages about vulnerable people and population and situation, we have to make sure that working together, we should have better access to the finance, we should have better access to the technology, and I think the work that we are doing here through the ICIMOD, the highlighting the issues, and then working together in the Mountain Forum, as well as those, the final, I think the most important issue is how to really bring the mountain countries together with the lowland, which are dependent on the mountain countries. If we take them together, the voice will be much bigger, the impact will be much the higher, and I should say that it will benefit not only the mountain country, but the people living in the lowland. I think that's what we need to really continue to do it. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, that's right. And I hope you stay with us as a mountain champion and still get these issues. You've done a marvelous work getting the mountain issues on the global stage. I think we need more too, so I do hope you stay with us. Now I want to, there's a few more, I'm running out of time. That's what my timekeepers are telling me, right? But I want a few more things. Want to explore a little bit more the role of women. I'd like to explore delve deeper into what you were saying about regional cooperation. And then Roland, actually, you don't mind if you have the last word on how to get that, or you can do it now since you're the one now to go. Okay. Let me just, I think, I don't want to wait till the last on this, but the role of women in adaptation. And we had a few, and if they can be short comments, that would be great. You already touched on that, you and Teresa both. But if you have anything else, you can add to that. And also, Yeshi Dorji, if you have a few words on that, might be nice. Yeah, Yeshi Dorji, I think they want you to speak on that.
Thank you. I think in all these countries, and I think generally in most of the countries, the livelihood, especially in our region where the livelihood is mainly dependent on agriculture and livestock, the woman's role is very crucial. So here, the woman plays a very crucial. And some of us has already highlighted how women's roles are increasing every day. The feminization of agriculture work. So this is timely that we need to recognize that. And most of the countries actually have already identified the ways and means how we could actually respect, and also at the same time how can we reduce the drudgery. So here, women in most of the societies are recognized not because they are naturally weak, but because of the cultural and social the functions they take part. They have been ascribed as being weak. But what we need to recognize is that we need to advocate a lot of things. We need to. But in providing all this, again, providing all this support to women, one word of caution is that we should not overburden them again. With the positive thinking, we should not again overburden them. Because sometimes we have a positive things that we want to recognize them, empower them, but on the other side, unknowingly, we sometimes overburden them. For them, what I believe is to have happiness, the gross national happiness within each woman, I think, and also with the other individuals, we just need to work 8 hours. And we need to have 8 hours of leisure and 8 hours of sleep. So 8 plus 8 plus 8. So that's my...
Plus 8.
Thank you, David. As most of you know, that Bangladesh, again, is one country where women are genuinely empowered. And if one can go through all sorts of indicators, and we'll see women are doing exceptionally well. But I think that was the wrong way of talking. One of the areas, while we talk about women's empowerment, do this for them and do that for them, I think what is really where we need to focus is to see how women can get into a position of decision making. That is where women are lagging behind. For this, there are two things which needs to be done. Firstly, to understand why women are important. You know, it's not just a question of aesthetics. Or it's nice to have women around the table, or token women in certain token position. That's not why it is. There are two reasons which are absolutely vital, and that is, first, women now constitute about 51% of the world's population. And to neglect more than the half of the population of the world cannot be explained away or justified in any way. So the women have a claim, a very, very strong claim. The second thing which we have all learned in our families, in our lives, is that our society, which is so hugely male-dominated, misses out on the perspective that women bring to a solution of a problem. So not having the perspective of women on major issues where the decision-making is mostly done by men, in a way has led to a lot of the problems that we are talking about today. These are the problems which men have created and now are looking for. So what I suggest, the way to do this, is women need to use their vote. They have an enormous voting power. 51% of the votes belong to them. And if you look at most countries' polling figures, women vote more than men vote. So why is it the women are not entering into a discussion and negotiations with the major political parties and say, you cannot take our vote unless you incorporate our demand? Oh, sorry. All right. Thank you. As I said, this is something I feel very passionately. I would like to have talked a little bit more, but I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, men, for talking on the women's role in adaptation. But what I propose is we will have more discussion over the next few days exactly on that issue. But definitely a good introduction. I'll come back to you, but I wanted to ask Roland Schaefer, Ambassador Schaefer, and the question is, what can be done to help decision makers in the rest of Asia and the world to understand the significance of HKH and resilience building? Do we reach out further?
Thank you very much, David. And I won't be the third man to speak about women. I think for a man, the most empowering message is to see a woman up there in these films, which we saw, to see after being trained by ICIMOD and say, I can do the same thing as a man. Nothing can be more empowering for a man than to have a woman like this and speak to him this way. But you were asking me about how to get the message out there, how to get the message out to the decision makers. So thank you for asking me this question, because I think it's the question which only a newcomer like me can maybe have a chance of answering, because I'm here only since 3 months representing Germany. And although I came to see David in the beginning, I still feel very much like a newcomer. But maybe this is the perspective which can lead you to some answers on this. And maybe to do this, I need to take you with me for a moment into a slice of the frivolous diplomatic life. Last week, the Nepali Association of Mountain Guides was having their annual convention, and they had invited all the other international association of mountain guides. And they had invited me, and I was, I think, the only ambassador who had taken the time to go there to the evening gala dinner. So you get out of your car into a great, big, wonderful hotel in Kathmandu, and you see all these women and families dressed up for a family reunion, beautiful saris, glittering saris on children and so on. They're all very occupied to go to their things. And you go through this glittering crowd, and you come to the place where this gala dinner is going to take place. And the door opens, and there is a sturdy young guy in a mountain jacket and says, "Good evening, Ambassador, welcome to this meeting." And the next one is also a sturdy young guy in a mountain dress. And they're all like this. And you feel completely transported from one place to another, because suddenly you are a part of a crowd which knows each other, where everybody has a relation to the other one, and the relation comes from the mountains. Because if you're a mountain guide, you need to be able to ensure your client that you will be there when he needs you, that you will know the way where you lead him. There is an immense feeling of trust between those who guide, and those who are clients. This is a very huge crowd. I know it's 24,000 tourists from Germany last year, and there will be more next year, but it's many more. It's millions of tourists who rely on people like this and who form a kind of brotherhood of reliability which comes from the mountains. And I think that's something, it came to me, that's something to exploit. This is like a brand. This is like a country brand or even a region-wide brand. To have something about reliability and something about trust and something about engineering and planning. This is, you could feel this even among the mountain guides and the people whom they look after. And if you were a German ambassador and you're used to work with German industry, you know that this is exactly the kind of quality which a German industrialist looks after, because he is producing things where he needs many components for a car, for anything we produce. And these components are produced worldwide. And you need to be sure that this product in a certain quality comes to this place at exactly the date you need it. Not on the 21st when you need it on the 22nd, and not on the 23rd. But on the 22nd of January, you need that component, that electronic plate to be produced and to be there, to be put into this overall product. That's what you rely on when you're an industrialist. And you rely on that trust, on that planning, on that clarity of commitment. And this is something which mountain people simply have. I pose the thesis that this is something which in the mountains exists because you need to plan, you need to have relationships, and you need to have to be reliable. So this is only part of what the Himalayan, Hindu Kush Himalaya mountain brand is about. But it's a very important part. And I think if one has the confidence in one's own brand, in the culture which makes more than just a country, it's important to have the confidence to take this across borders, not just across borders of states, as you're already doing, but also across borders of communities. Why not try to use the mountain guides to do something with industrialists in Germany. I think this is something which, at least as a diplomat, I would like to engage in, to use this kind of brand to make it possible to get investors into this country. And if you speak about livelihood, you need to get also private enterprise to engage in activities which can then lead the people in the mountains to produce things which they can sell elsewhere. And this we'll never get only through development aid cooperation. So important they are, but this will not be the final words. You need to interest the people who have the money and who want to earn money with this way. And believe you me, the brand which the Himalayan Hindu Kush region has is a strong brand, and one needs to take this outside. What better to do this than through the cooperation which ICIMOD is doing, which we're doing here, because this brand, which is mixing trust, planning, and cooperation, is very powerful to achieve economic success and to sell things you produce much more expensive than if you didn't have this brand. So this is the first thing, the main thing, which I think, to have confidence and trust in your own strength and to develop this together and to bring this out as one brand, just as made in Germany or made in the US, has a certain brand. Made in the Hindu Kush Himalaya, not only industrially, but also in terms of social and economic cooperation, is a thing to develop, and I think it's strong. One doesn't have to wait long. It's there at your doorsteps, and you're already doing it, to use this. Other things are important as well, but you're doing it already to link to the issues of the foreign decision makers. But maybe I leave it at that, to take the brand out there, and not only to the decision makers which we're used to work for, which is politicians or bureaucrats, like I myself am one, but also to those other groups who actually will make the real difference, and these are industrialists, trade unions, and private people who have an economic interest in the region. Thank you.
Wonderful idea, the brand. We can do that today. I think it's a great, fantastic idea. So, Sonam, you were looking like you were dying. Did you have a comment in there?
I just was thinking, I think he came to the point that I wanted to, that in the short run, I would go meet policymakers, commissioners, and ministers to influence decision making. But in the long run, in democracies, I think it has to be priority of the people. Only then will governments move. And therefore, to influence policy decisions, I would make the importance of the mountains for their sustenance also understood by common people. And again, for that, one would use out-of-box ways, looking at who they listen to. And it could be spiritual leaders, it could be film stars, but making the mountains a priority of the people of the rest of Asia. And then not to forget education. I think one great role ICIMOD could play is that to make chapters in the curriculum of these nations on the importance of mountains. In my own schooling, the only mention of mountains, leave aside Ladakh, was, I think, about Ladakh, was that very ill-informed chapters which said this is a frozen part with primitive hunters and herders. People don't even know how it affects their lives. So the importance that we have been talking about needs to get to the ordinary people, and only then decision makers will give importance. Otherwise, even if they hold it close to their hearts, they're not going to disappoint their people.
Okay, good. By the way, and thank you for that again. We do have a Himalayan University Consortium, and one of the things to do is to get the mountain ideas in the curricula. But so thank you for bringing that up as well. I want to have at least time for one more. I'm looking at my timekeepers because I wanted to turn to Dr. Saraswat. And we've talked a lot about regional cooperation. I think it's not a bad thing to end on. If you had a few ideas about regional cooperation.
Hello. Yeah, I think, as I mentioned in my earlier talk, the most effective mechanisms for regional cooperation, particularly on resilience building, would be through the intervention of science and technology. I'm a scientist, so always I find solutions to any problem through the route of science and technology. And it is only through this that you can actually have all these effects, whether they are natural or anthropogenic, they can be mitigated. Hence, one cooperation that can be certainly proposed is that we support regional cooperation in resilience building through science and technology. Or for basically, when you want to do good science, you have to have a good mechanism for doing research, and also you should have good mechanism for monitoring the cause and effect. So obviously this is one area which needs to be supported through a cooperation, and ICIMOD could be one platform which can facilitate that. Collection of data, sharing data, collecting information, and taking all that information into some form for prediction of all these kind of catastrophes which we are talking today. It could be one way of doing things. Another one is that we have these programs today. Many of these programs I'm talking of, for example, I talked of 5 thematic programs of Niti Aayog, where we mentioned that we are working on skill development. Why not, we are also working on this mapping of the rivers, mapping of the rivers and mapping of all these glaciers and things like that. And we are working on it. Why not we have a major program for HKH program, which can be called a HKH program, in which we are going to map all these rivers and springs and things like that. And that can run across to the regional cooperation among all the nations. Because rivers are going in all around, and all these things are happening. All these areas are common, so why not having a program like that? Similarly, we were talking about sustainable tourism. Now a huge impact of tourism, because transboundary tourism depends largely on various tour operators and things like that, where there are no norms. Can we harmonize? Can we bring in harmonization among these tour operators? Or can we even provide through a regional cooperation a platform on which the tour operators, the various organizers, the hotel, the entrepreneurs, the industry people, they call government people, the private people, all can have a dialogue and then work the sustainable tourism and remove all the ills which are affecting tourism and ultimately the ecology of the Himalayan region. Can we not do that? Similarly, can I not have a program wherein the young people, the people who have been going out of the Himalayan regions, basically train them for entrepreneurship, for creating their own jobs. Rather than looking for jobs, they can create jobs using the available ecosystem in the Himalayan region. Why not we create that kind of a regional cooperation among various nations where we can train these youngsters who are living in the Himalayas? Finally, I would like to top it up with 2 sentences that I would request this platform to create a science, technology, innovation policy forum for Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And that forum should be the part of the entire nations who are in this particular region. And ultimately, there can be no other better solution than a regional cooperation like we have the Alpine Convention. Why not we have the Hindu Kush Himalayan region convention? Why not we do that? And that will certainly bring in all policy, that will bring in all the research and development, that will bring in all issues which are even some of the conflicts which exist among people, they can also be resolved. So these 2 regional cooperation mechanisms certainly will be very useful if we really want to have resolution of all the problems and have a sustainable solution for HKH. Thank you.
I just can't end quite there because I needed to. You presented a few ideas, an HKH Science Technology Policy Forum and something like a Himalayan Convention. I just wanted to ask others, especially from the countries, do you think that's a feasible, good idea? Just so we can have just a quick intervention on that, on regional cooperation.
Well, I think we have heard, extensively how interrelated we all are in terms of mountains, but also ecosystem services that we provide to the lowland. Definitely collaboration among all the countries at a higher level would be very important, but we have to go into the details how this really works out. And one of the things perhaps, as Mr. Saraswat just said, we can really, the this convention as well as how they are working and what are the lessons that we can learn. Similarly, perhaps we can also look at some of the African countries that are also doing in the mountain countries in the mountain region. So we can definitely look at that and see how far we can go on that. But second, I would also like to say that maybe, based on what you have said, in all the three dimensions, social, economic, and environmental, perhaps we can have the mountain region looking at sharing of the best practices and supporting each other. That would be something we can really look at in every dimension. And the third, I would say, perhaps the developed country partners are so supportive of the countries. If you look at all the countries, the healthcare countries, and many of the partners which are here are also very much strong bilateral partners as well. Perhaps you can also see how the national mountain, sustainable mountain development programs of these countries can get further support from all these countries. I think that would be something that we can also really look at.
Thank you. Actually, the ideas that are emerging from people here, I think they are quite good. But the thing is, we have already the ICIMOD board, so if we can give the opportunity for them to look at, because they would study and we need to. Because I can say ICIMOD is a solution to a sustainable future for Asia. There are possibilities. One of the solutions. But that ICIMOD needs to be sustainable in future. That we have to be careful.
Your vote of confidence in ICIMOD. On that topic, are there other comments? Real fast ones, Bimala, and need one. Getting in trouble by my timekeeper.
I just wanted to put a point of concern here. Regional cooperation, extremely important idea, very very good. It will aid, But my worry is, today we are discussing about mountain issues. Do we represent mountain here? Do we represent mountain people here? No. For me, why I'm putting this question is because Nepal demonstrates an excellent example of community forestry. Why community forestry was successful? Because it was people's federation that led the whole momentum. So I think we make a lot of regional associations, we make a lot of discussion, we discuss a lot, but how much the innovations that we discuss here, how much the learning that we discuss here reaches to the community is more important. And I think we need to address that as well. Let's make people's federation also to link with this.
Quick replies, because Teresa, you have one. And sorry,
I would like to kind of echo what Mr. Dorji of Bhutan said, that yes, we already have this platform through ICIMOD, but I also would like to remind everyone, I've actually looked at a national voluntary report under the SDGs that are being written and being presented at the high-level political forum every year to the UN. And all of the 8 countries, I think with the exception of Pakistan and Myanmar, came forward with reports. And they are a very rich source of integrated information. And interestingly, there was, in all these 6 reports, there was a strong mention of the role of women in the SDGs as well as the private sector. I think that could be a wonderful source of forming such a platform, or strengthening the platform of knowledge exchange that's already under ICIMOD.
Okay, I think, fantastic. Actually, I think I went over time, so you have to excuse me on that. You may. One last word.
Regional cooperation in a diffuse manner will not yield results. What has happened in all these conventions which I mentioned, there has been diffused effort. The one fundamental requirement for any cooperation to emerge successful is the mission mode planning along with the people for whom this cooperation is being done. And I fully agree there that this cooperation cannot be without the people from mountain, without the institutions in that region, without the major issues which are their part of their livelihood. Those have to be flagged as part of the regional cooperation. Then only the cooperation will be successful. Otherwise, it will be the plains versus plains, and hence no solutions will emerge.
Thank you. By the way, we do have the Arctic also offers an example. The microphone. And what they do is they include the indigenous people right in the council itself. So I think what Vimala was saying too is really good. I think I have to close it there. I think it's very, very hard to you know, I think we have to continue in the forum on the next days. So, so what I'd like to, it's been fantastic, a lot of inspirational thoughts, a lot of positive thoughts, solutions moving forward, and I love, let's continue that discussion on regional cooperation. So now, with that, let's give a round of applause, huge round of applause for the panelists. And we do have plenty of time in the next days to continue the discussion. I'll hand it over to Naina.
Thank you very much, high-level panelists and moderator. We take this opportunity to launch an ICIMOD publication titled Building Mountain Resilience, Solutions from the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And may I please request Dr. David Molden to kindly launch, to say a few words about the book before the launch.
So it's what this book is, a compendium of solution that ICIMOD has been working on over the last 34 years. And it is work done very much together with communities, very practical oriented solution. And it does provide information about approaches and technologies that can inform communities, practitioners, decision makers, and governments alike. And in that way, we believe that these small solutions presented can make a great contribution to the mountains and the global agenda. So it's a wonderful book, just a very practical type solutions that ICIMOD plus partners have been putting forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molden. May I please request all the dignitaries on stage to kindly take the book in your hand. And yes, and Dr. Molden, can you please formally launch the book? Can you please unwrap the book? Yeah. May I also please request the editors of the publication, Dr. Arvinda Mishra, Senior Social Scientist, and Mr. Nandakishore Agrawal, Coordinator of the Himalayan Climate Change Adaptation Program, to kindly join the delegates on the stage for a group photo. A few more photos with the editors of the publication. Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, please kindly continue to be on the stage for a few more minutes. Now I'd like to request Mr. Nandakishore Agrawal, the conference convener, to kindly present about the conference and also give the vote of thanks.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies and dignitaries on the dais, Member of Parliament, Secretaries from regional member countries of ICIMOD, participants from Youth Forum, distinguished media delegates, invitees, ladies and gentlemen, and my colleagues from ICIMOD. A very good evening. This has been a fantastic afternoon for all of us who have been here working hard for this particular conference. It is my deep honor and great privilege to talk about the purpose and design of the conference. The conference is aimed at contributing to the addressing three core challenges of resilience building in the Himalayas. First, to understand, change, and raise awareness about resilience from the mountain perspective. We just heard a very inspiring talk by all our high-level leaders that how this is so important to the resilience building in the mountain. Second, to identify options and opportunities for developing a portfolio of resilience building solutions. And we just presented a book to you in which number of solutions are presented. There is a huge opportunity to tap rich traditional knowledge and practices with scientific knowledge to develop simple, affordable, and replicable solutions that would not only benefit the mountain communities, but also a large population in Asia and beyond. And the third and most important one is that with this conference, we would like to co-create an action agenda for resilient Hindu Kush Himalaya and forge new partnerships for action. For the next 3 days, the design of conference revolves around challenges and solutions for resilience building in the Himalayas. And the conference is designed in a very, very interactive way. We will not bore you with the PowerPoint presentations, long PowerPoint presentations. We just focus on as much interaction as possible. It is in this context, tomorrow we will discuss science, policy, and practice of resilience building in 2 plenaries to begin with, and then a set of 2 sets of 4 parallel sessions in which we will discuss what Dr. Saraswat just now mentioned, the 8 mountain priorities identified based on the Sustainable Development Goals. Later, it would be our pleasure to treat you with some local cultural performances as well as some food and drinks over reception dinner before we call it a day tomorrow. Day after tomorrow, that is 5th December, will be the day of action. Here we will talk about some large-scale programs which has helped in resilience building, followed by some parallel sessions exploring the mechanisms for integration and policy action for resilience building. On this day, we will also have marketplace solutions where 20 participants from 8 member countries of ICIMOD are presenting their solutions, few of which you saw today already. And we also have 20 posters and number of photographs which have been gone through a global competitive process and selected and presented here. It is our belief that this will be a treat to watch, and a word of encouragement from your side will go a long way in shaping their career in the resilience building future. Finally, 6th December will be the day of finalizing action agenda for resilience Hindu Kush Himalaya. We would like the action agenda to be based on collective knowledge and wisdom of best of experts in the region and beyond. Therefore, we would really like to request you all to contribute actively to the resilience building agenda. And together with you all, we wish to take it forward beyond this conference. Before I close, it is a privilege and great joy for me to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the conference team. And a number of individuals and institutions have contributed to bring this conference to this stage. And I just cannot thank them enough. But I have to extend our gratitude and appreciation to those who have been very instrumental in this regard. To the Right Honorable President of Nepal, our sincere thanks, who gave positive indication already 6 months in advance for attending this conference. And finally, today, she was kind enough to come here and grace the occasion and inaugurate the conference. The Right Honorable President, we deeply appreciate this gesture, which has tremendously raised the occasion, and we truly enjoyed your deeply inspiring speech. To Honorable Minister Mithila Chaudhary, Government of Nepal, for not only accepting to grace the occasion, but also supporting the organizers throughout the process. Despite having a very high demand on her time due to ongoing election process in Nepal. And it was a delight to hear, we all noticed it was a delight to hear her speech in between when she talked about the number of issues. To the Government of Nepal, particularly the Ministry of Population and Environment for being the co-organizer of the conference, Mr. Prakash Mathema, who took over as secretary just 3 weeks ago. Sir, We sincerely value your team's effort and unconditional and smooth support to the whole process. To the Secretary, Dr. Biswanath Oli, who has now moved to another ministry, but in the beginning, he was the one who accepted our request to be co-organizer, and also throughout the process, he supported in designing the conference. To the honorable ministers and members of parliament from the regional member countries, excellencies, and over 100 speakers who are here, and more than 400 delegates, a big thank you. Without your support, the conference would not have reached this stage. And if I say one phrase for you all, if time is money, you have contributed millions. To the media from Nepal and the regional member country for not only continuously covering the conference since the day we announced the conference, but also coming here in big numbers and to bring the message to the most important stakeholders, that is people of our country. To the conference supporters, particularly the European Union and our core donors, a sincere thank you for your continued confidence in our work. To the ICIMOD management for giving us the opportunity to let us organize this ICIMOD's flagship event. And most importantly, to the ICIMOD administration team. You know why I'm smiling. Despite multiple challenges, and sometimes real challenges, everyone worked very hard to get this venue ready for this conference. And one of my colleagues yesterday put it in a very, very nice way. Kanchan is sitting here. She said, something magical happening around us. And I totally believe this was a magical to get this venue ready. And all the team members, they worked very hard with the extreme sincerity, and that's what made it possible. So thank you. Finally, an event of this magnitude cannot be organized overnight. It has been a journey full of inspiration, excitement, and passion to organize the conference. Therefore, last but not the least, to all the conference team members who have made this possible through over 6 months of tireless efforts, you sincerely deserve a special thank you and big applause. Thank you very much.
I have to thank Nan Kishore for his leadership in this too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agrawal. The organizations and individuals involved in the preparation of the conference deserve the due acknowledgement stated. Mr. Agrawal, your role as the chief architect of this international conference has been much appreciated. A sincere gratitude to you and your team. May I please request Dr. David Molden to kindly present the token of appreciation to our high-level panelists. Thank you very much, high-level panelists. Just a minute. Thank you very much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a pleasure now to welcome the facilitators for the conference, Miriam Lindwer and Andrew Steele, who are the facilitators, and they will begin their role from tomorrow. It is my pleasure to welcome them, and they will be giving some announcements. Thank you very much.
All right, we know how much you want to go to your high tea, but we're going to ask you for another 2 minutes. Now, maybe it's going to be 4 or 5. I'm Miriam.
My name's Andrew.
And we will be the facilitators for this event. from now onwards. We're very, very happy to be here, and we have a few announcements for you.